On my 81st birthday, my daughter-in-law threw my cane on the floor and told me to crawl to get it. 1 week later, I canceled the will and donated $7 million to a senior shelter. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Thelma, and I'm about to tell you about the day I realized that sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you deepest. It was my 81st birthday. The living room was decorated with balloons and streamers, and 23 people had gathered to celebrate. At least, that's what I thought they were there for. I was sitting in my usual chair by the window, my wooden cane resting against my knee. My arthritis had been particularly painful that morning, making every movement feel like broken glass grinding in my joints. But I was happy. After 2 years of feeling invisible in my own home, I thought maybe today would be different. "Thelma, could you come help me in the kitchen?" Lyra's voice was sweet as honey, the way it always was when others were watching. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon light. She was 34, beautiful, and had married my son Robert 5 years ago. At first, I thought I was gaining a daughter. How wrong I was. I reached for my cane, gripping the worn handle that had supported me through countless days since my hip surgery 3 years ago. As I started to stand, Lyra stepped forward. "Actually, never mind," she said, and before I could react, she grabbed my cane and threw it across the room. The wooden stick clattered against the hardwood floor, sliding under the dining table in the far corner. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent room. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to me. "Oops," Lyra said, not sounding sorry at all. "Guess you'll have to get that yourself." I stared at her, confusion flooding my mind. "Lyra, I can't walk without—" "Oh, come on, Thelma. A little exercise won't hurt you. Besides, crawling is good for the joints, isn't it? I read that somewhere." She said it with such casual cruelty, as if she were suggesting I try a new recipe. The room remained frozen in uncomfortable silence. I looked around at the faces of people I'd known for decades. My neighbor Sarah, who I'd helped through her husband's cancer. My church friend Margaret, who I'd driven to doctor's appointments when she couldn't drive anymore. My own son Robert, standing by the fireplace with his mouth slightly open. None of them said a word. "Well?" Lyra crossed her arms, that familiar smirk playing at her lips. "We're all waiting." The humiliation burned in my chest like acid. I was 81 years old, reduced to crawling on my hands and knees in front of people I'd once held dinner parties for. But what choice did I have? I needed that cane. Without it, I was trapped. Slowly, painfully, I lowered myself to the floor. My knees hit the hardwood with a sharp crack that sent shooting pain up my spine. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second marking my degradation. I began to crawl. Each movement was agony. My arthritic hands pressed against the cold floor, my knees dragging across the wood that Robert and I had installed together 40 years ago when this was our house, our home. The dining table seemed miles away, though it was probably only 15 feet. "Look at that," Lyra's voice drifted down to me. "She's actually doing it. I told you she was more capable than she pretends to be." Pretends to be. As if my pain was an act. As if the mornings I could barely get out of bed were just for attention. When I finally reached my cane, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grasp it. I used the table leg to pull myself up, my entire body trembling with exhaustion and humiliation. The walk back to my chair felt like a death march. As I sat down, trying to catch my breath, I heard Lyra address the room. "Sorry about that, everyone. As you can see, we're dealing with some challenging behaviors. The doctor says it's quite common at her age." Challenging behaviors. Doctor. I had never been to any doctor who said such things, but Lyra spoke with such authority, such confidence, that I saw several people nodding sympathetically. "It must be so hard for you, dear," Margaret said to Lyra, actually reaching out to pat her arm in comfort. "Oh, it is," Lyra sighed dramatically. "But Robert and I are committed to taking care of her, even when she has these little episodes." Episodes. I wanted to scream that this wasn't an episode, that she had deliberately humiliated me, but I knew no one would believe me. Lyra had been building this narrative for months, painting me as a confused old woman whose mind was slipping. The party continued around me as if nothing had happened. People ate cake, made small talk, and occasionally glanced my way with what I now recognized as pity. Not the fond pity you feel for a beloved elder, but the uncomfortable pity reserved for burdens. That night, after everyone had gone home, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. Robert had helped me upstairs without mentioning what had happened. He'd kissed my forehead and told me to get some rest, as if this was just another ordinary evening. But it wasn't ordinary. It was the night I realized I had become a prisoner in my own home, and my jailer wore the face of family. What I didn't know then was that this humiliation, as painful as it was, would become the moment that saved my life. Looking back, I can see that my humiliation didn't start with the cane. It began 3 years earlier, just 6 months after my husband Harold died. Harold and I had been married for 58 years. He was my anchor, my voice when I couldn't find my own, my strength when arthritis made simple tasks feel impossible. When he passed from a sudden heart attack, I felt like half of myself had been buried with him. Robert was wonderful those first few weeks. He came by every day, brought groceries, helped with bills. I was grateful to have such a caring son. But then Lyra started joining him. "Mom, you shouldn't be living alone," she said one evening, settling into Harold's old recliner as if she belonged there. "This house is too big for you. Too many stairs. Too many memories. Too many memories." As if my life with Harold was something to be swept away like dust. "I'm managing fine," I told them, though truthfully, the silence in the house was deafening. "Are you, though?" Lyra's voice carried that tone I would later learn to dread, sweet concern hiding sharp judgment. "Robert found expired milk in your refrigerator yesterday. And those bills on the counter? Some of them are past due." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Yes, I'd forgotten about a few bills. Harold had always handled the finances, and adjusting to managing everything alone was overwhelming. But forgetting to pay the electric bill once didn't mean I was losing my mind. "Maybe we should consider other options," Robert said gently. "There are some nice retirement communities." No, the word came out sharper than I intended. "This is my home. Harold and I built our life here. I'm not leaving." Lyra and Robert exchanged a look that made my stomach tighten. It was the kind of look adults share when dealing with a stubborn child. "Of course you want to stay," Lyra said. "We understand that, don't we, Robert?" Robert nodded, but he looked uncertain. "That's why we've been thinking," she continued. "What if we moved in with you, just temporarily, until you're feeling more settled?" The suggestion felt like ice water in my veins. Move in? This house had been my sanctuary with Harold, our private world. The idea of sharing it felt like a violation. "I don't think that's necessary." "Mom," Robert interrupted, his voice taking on that patient tone people use with confused elderly people. "Lyra has some great ideas about how to make things easier for you. She's worked in healthcare, remember?" Lyra had been a receptionist at a dental office for 6 months, hardly what I'd call healthcare experience, but I didn't say that. Instead, I found myself agreeing to a trial period. "Just a few weeks," they said, "just until I felt stronger." They moved in the following Saturday. The changes started immediately. Lyra rearranged the kitchen for efficiency, moving everything I needed to high shelves I couldn't reach. She replaced my old tea bags with organic ones that tasted like grass. She threw away Harold's coffee mug because it was unsanitary to keep dishes from deceased people. "Don't you think it's healthier to let go of the past?" she asked when she found me crying over the garbage can. "Holding on to these things isn't helping you heal." Robert supported every change. When I complained about not being able to reach my dishes, he nodded sympathetically and suggested I ask for help instead of struggling alone. When I said I missed my old tea, he reminded me that Lyra was just trying to improve my health. Slowly, my own home became foreign to me. The worst part was how gradual it all was. Lyra never made grand dramatic gestures. She moved like water, finding every crack in my life and slowly filling the spaces until I forgot what it felt like to breathe freely. First, It was suggesting I didn't need to drive anymore after I backed into our mailbox, something that could happen to anyone. But Lyra convinced Robert it was a sign of declining reflexes. Then it was discouraging my friends from visiting because I seemed overwhelmed by social interaction. Soon, my weekly bridge game became too stimulating. My volunteer work at the library was too strenuous, and my afternoon walks were dangerous for someone with balance issues. Each restriction came wrapped in concern. Each limitation was presented as protection. "We just want you to be safe, Mom," Robert would say, and I could see he genuinely believed it. By the end of the first year, I rarely left the house. My friends stopped calling because Lyra always answered and explained that I was resting. My doctor's visits became supervised events where Lyra spoke for me, describing symptoms I didn't have and concerns I'd never expressed. "She's been having some confusion lately," she'd tell Dr. Peterson while I sat there in silent shock. "Forgetting to take her medications, getting lost in conversations. We're worried about early dementia." I wanted to scream that I wasn't confused, that my mind was perfectly clear, but what could I say? That my daughter-in-law was lying? That would only confirm their fears about my mental state. The medication started shortly after that visit. Little white pills for anxiety that made me drowsy. Blue ones for mood stabilization that left me feeling disconnected from my own thoughts. When I tried to refuse them, Lyra would get that concerned look. "Thelma, this is exactly the kind of resistance Dr. Peterson warned us about. The medication is helping you feel calmer. Don't you want to feel better?" But I didn't feel better. I felt like I was disappearing, one small piece at a time. The house that had once been filled with Harold's laughter and my own voice became a tomb of whispered conversations and careful management. Robert and Lyra spoke about me in the third person even when I was in the room, discussing my care like I was a pet that needed feeding and walking. I began to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the woman who had once organized charity drives and taught Sunday school really was just a confused old lady who needed constant supervision. But deep down, in a place the medications couldn't reach, I knew the truth. I wasn't disappearing because I was sick. I was disappearing because someone was systematically erasing me. What I didn't realize was that the worst was yet to come. The truth came to me in the most unexpected way, just 2 weeks after my birthday humiliation. I was sitting in the sunroom, pretending to nap, while Lyra and her friend Jessica had coffee in the kitchen. The medications made me genuinely drowsy most afternoons, but that day I'd only pretended to take the blue pill, hiding it under my tongue until I could spit it out later. My mind felt clearer than it had in months, sharp in a way that almost hurt after so much fog. I could hear their voices carrying through the thin walls of our old house, and something in Lyra's tone made me strain to listen. "I swear, Jess, sometimes I think she does it on purpose," Lyra was saying. "The whole confused act, like when she forgot where we put her checkbook last week." "Really?" Jessica's voice sounded skeptical. "She seems pretty out of it to me." Lyra laughed, and the sound made my blood run cold. "Oh, she's definitely declining. Don't get me wrong, but I think she plays it up when it's convenient, like when we ask her to sign papers or make decisions about the house." "Papers? What papers?" I felt my heart start to race. Speaking of which," Jessica said, "how's the whole inheritance situation going? I know you were worried about that." "Better than expected, actually. Robert handles all her finances now, so we're getting a complete picture of what we're working with. Let's just say Harold was better at saving money than either of us realized." My hands gripped the arms of my chair. Harold's money. Our money. The savings account we'd built together over 58 years of marriage. The life insurance policy he'd taken out to make sure I'd be comfortable after he was gone. "How much are we talking about?" Jessica asked. $7.2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I knew we had savings, but I'd never realized exactly how much. Harold had always told me not to worry about money, that he'd taken care of everything. Now I understood why Lyra's concern for my welfare had been so persistent. "Jesus," Jessica whispered. "No wonder you're being so patient with the whole situation." "Patient?" Lyra's voice turned sharp. "Jess, you have no idea what it's like living with her. The constant neediness, the way she looks at me like I'm the villain when I'm trying to help her. Yesterday, she actually accused me of hiding her reading glasses when they were literally on top of her head. They had been on top of my head. I remembered that incident clearly. But what Lyra didn't mention was that I'd spent 20 minutes looking for them because she'd moved them there while I was sleeping, then acted like I was losing my mind when I couldn't find them. At least, you know it won't be forever, Jessica said gently. God, I hope not. Some days I think about just putting her in a home and being done with it. There are some decent places that would take good care of her for probably $200,000 a year. She'd get professional care, and Robert and I could actually start our own lives. Professional care. For $200,000 a year, out of my $7 million. Why don't you? Jessica asked. Robert's not ready yet. He still has this fantasy that his mom is just going through a rough patch and will bounce back to her old self. He doesn't see what I see every day, the real decline. But he's starting to come around, especially after incidents like the birthday thing. The Kane incident hadn't been spontaneous cruelty. It had been calculated, performed, designed to show everyone, including Robert, just how far I'd supposedly deteriorated. That was pretty bad, Jessica agreed. When you texted me about it, I couldn't believe she actually crawled across the floor. Texted. She'd texted about my humiliation like it was entertainment. I felt terrible about it, Lyra said, but I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. But sometimes these situations happen, and you have to let people see the reality of what you're dealing with. Robert needed to see how bad things have gotten. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. Everything made sense now. The gradual isolation, the medications that made me foggy and compliant, the constant narrative about my declining mental state. Lyra wasn't just stealing my life. She was stealing my identity, my autonomy, my very sense of self. And she was doing it for $7 million. Have you thought about what you'll do with the money? Jessica asked. I mean, after she dies? Lyra said it so casually, like she was discussing what to have for dinner. Robert and I have talked about it. He wants to pay off the house first, maybe buy something bigger. I'm thinking more long-term, investments, maybe a vacation rental property. We're both still young enough to really enjoy it. Young enough to enjoy the money Harold and I had spent our entire marriage accumulating. The money he'd saved by working double shifts at the factory, by driving old cars and taking modest vacations, by carefully budgeting every penny so his wife would be secure after he was gone. You're so lucky, Jessica sighed. Tom and I will be working until we're 80 just to afford retirement. Trust me, I'm earning every penny. Living with her is like being a full-time caregiver and prison guard rolled into one. Yesterday, she asked me 3 times what day it was. 3 times. Sometimes I wonder if she's just messing with me, but I hadn't asked what day it was. I'd asked what we were having for dinner, because Lyra had stopped telling me about meals until the last minute, leaving me hungry and confused about the household schedule. She'd twisted that into evidence of memory loss. Well, at least you know Robert appreciates everything you're doing, Jessica said. Does he, though? Sometimes I think he takes it for granted. Like this is just what wives do. Sacrifice their careers and social lives to take care of difficult in-laws. But I didn't sign up to be a nursemaid when I married him. No, I thought bitterly. You signed up to be a widow's inheritor. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I'd heard enough. I sat in that sunroom until long after Jessica left, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd discovered. Lyra wasn't my daughter-in-law trying to help a confused old woman. She was a predator who'd identified a vulnerable target and systematically set about claiming her prize. The medications, the isolation, the constant narrative about my declining mental state, it was all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to make me disappear while keeping my money very much present. But there was something Lyra didn't know, something I'd never told Robert or anyone else since Harold died. Harold had insisted I stay involved in our financial planning. Every account, every investment, every policy, my name was on all of it. And more importantly, Harold had made sure I knew exactly how to access everything without needing anyone's permission. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Power. That night, I lay in bed and began to plan. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I woke up before Lyra. For months, she'd been bringing me breakfast in bed along with my morning medications, a routine that kept me drowsy and dependent until nearly noon. But that day, I set my old alarm clock for 6:30 and crept downstairs while the house was still quiet. In Harold's study, I found what I was looking for. Hidden behind his collected works of Mark Twain was a small fireproof box containing our important documents. Harold had shown me this hiding place years ago, making me promise to remember it just in case. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were copies of our wills, insurance policies, investment statements, and most importantly, a small leather address book with the contact information for our attorney, financial advisor, and accountant. Thomas Brennan had been our lawyer for 30 years. He'd handled our house purchase, drawn up our wills, and helped Harold set up the investment accounts that had grown into our substantial savings. If anyone would help me understand my situation, it was Tom. I memorized his phone number, then carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. When Lyra came downstairs at 7:15, I was sitting at the kitchen table in my robe, looking appropriately confused about how to work the coffee maker. "Oh, sweetie, you shouldn't be trying to do this yourself," she said, rushing over with that familiar tone of patronizing concern. "You know caffeine interferes with your medications." She handed me my usual morning pills, 3 of them now, instead of the original 2. I palmed them expertly while pretending to swallow, a skill I'd been perfecting for weeks. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, studying my face. "You seem a little agitated." "I'm fine," I said, making my voice sound uncertain. "Just, what day is it again?" The satisfaction that flickered across her face made my stomach turn. "It's Thursday, Thelma. We talked about this yesterday, remember?" I hadn't asked about the day yesterday, but I nodded vaguely and let her guide me to my chair with the gentle firmness she used whenever Robert was around. The real challenge would be making the phone call. Lyra monitored my activities closely, always finding reasons to check on me every few minutes. But I remembered something Harold used to say. The best time to do something important is when everyone thinks you're doing something unimportant. After lunch, I announced that I needed a nap. This was expected. The medications were supposed to make me drowsy in the afternoons. Lyra helped me upstairs, tucked me into bed with patronizing gentleness, and told me to call if I needed anything. 20 minutes later, I heard her start the vacuum cleaner in the living room. The sound would mask my voice perfectly. I used the old rotary phone in the master bedroom, dialing Tom Brennan's number with fingers that trembled from more than arthritis. When his secretary answered, I almost hung up. What if this was a mistake? What if I really was as confused as everyone seemed to think? Brennan Law Office. This is Marie speaking. Hello, Marie. This is Thelma Richardson. I need to speak with Tom about some urgent legal matters. Oh, Mrs. Richardson. How lovely to hear from you. I was so sorry about Harold's passing. Tom's in court this afternoon, but I can schedule you for tomorrow morning if it's urgent. It is urgent, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. But I need to ask a favor. Could we meet somewhere other than his office? I'm having some family complications. Marie's voice grew concerned. Of course. Would you prefer he come to your home? No, somewhere private. Maybe that little cafe on Maple Street? Brewster's? Certainly. How about 10 o'clock? Perfect. And Marie, this conversation needs to stay between us for now. After I hung up, I lay back on my pillow, my heart racing. I'd done it. For the first time in 3 years, I'd taken action on my own behalf. But getting to the meeting would be another challenge entirely. The next morning, I waited until Lyra left for her weekly grocery shopping, a routine she'd established to give herself breaks from caregiving. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I called a taxi. I need a ride to Maple Street, I told the dispatcher. It's for an elderly passenger who walks with a cane. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Tom Brennan in a quiet corner booth at Brewster's Cafe. He looked older than I remembered, his hair completely gray now, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Thelma, it's good to see you, he said, though I could tell he was concerned by my appearance. I'd lost weight over the past year, and the medications had left me with a frail, uncertain quality that even I could see in the mirror. "Tom, I need your help," I said without preamble. "I think my daughter-in-law is trying to steal my inheritance." I told him everything. The gradual isolation, the medications, the constant narrative about my declining mental state, and most importantly, what I'd overheard about the $7 million. Tom listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a small leather notebook. "Thelma," he said finally, "I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to answer them honestly. Do you feel that your mental faculties are impaired in any way?" "No," I said firmly. "I'm lonely. I'm grieving Harold, and I've been drugged for months, but my mind is clear." "Have you signed any documents that you didn't understand or that were misrepresented to you?" I thought carefully. "Not yet, but Lyra keeps talking about papers, and I think she's building up to something." Tom nodded grimly. "The good news is that Harold set up your accounts very carefully. You have complete control over all assets, and any attempt to change that would require your explicit consent and my verification. Nobody can touch your money without your direct authorization." Relief flooded through me. "So I can access the accounts myself?" "Absolutely. In fact, I'd recommend we do that today. But first, I want to address another concern." He leaned forward. "Thelma, what you're describing sounds like elder abuse, financial exploitation, psychological manipulation, possibly illegal administration of medication. These are serious crimes." "I just want it to stop," I said. "I want my life back." "Then we're going to get it for you. But I need to know, how far are you willing to go to protect yourself?" I thought about the $7 million Harold had saved for my security, about my home being turned into a prison, about crawling across my own floor while people I'd known for decades watched in silence. "As far as necessary," I said. Tom smiled for the first time since I'd sat down. "Good, because I have some ideas." That afternoon, I rode the taxi home with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Hidden in my purse was a new cell phone Tom had helped me purchase, programmed with his direct number and the numbers of several other professionals who might be needed in the coming days. More importantly, I had a plan. When Lyra returned from her errands, she found me exactly where she'd left me, sitting in my usual chair, looking appropriately drowsy and confused. But inside, I was wide awake and calculating. She had no idea that her carefully constructed web was about to collapse around her. 3 days later, I put my plan into motion. Tom had arranged everything perfectly. At 10:30 on Tuesday morning, while Lyra was at her yoga class and Robert was at work, a car arrived to take me to the bank. I'd told Lyra I was napping, then slipped out the back door with the spare key I'd hidden weeks ago. At First National Bank, I met with Margaret Walsh, the senior account manager who had handled Harold's and my finances for 15 years. The confusion on her face when she saw me was immediate. "Mrs. Richardson, we weren't expecting you today. Didn't Mrs. Lyra Richardson call yesterday about accessing your accounts?" My blood went cold. "What exactly did she say?" Margaret consulted her computer screen. "She said you'd been having some cognitive issues and that she needed to discuss your financial care with us. She mentioned something about power of attorney documents." Power of attorney, the final piece of Lyra's puzzle. If she could convince everyone I was incompetent, she could gain legal control over my money while I was still alive. "Margaret," I said carefully, "I need you to understand something very clearly. I have never given anyone power of attorney over my accounts. My mind is completely sound, and any attempt to access my money without my direct presence and authorization is fraud." Margaret's eyes widened. "Mrs. Richardson, are you saying—" "I'm saying my daughter-in-law has been systematically isolating me and drugging me in an attempt to steal my inheritance. And today, I'm going to make sure she can't." What happened next took exactly 47 minutes. With Tom's guidance and Margaret's assistance, I transferred every penny of my savings, all $7.2 million, into a new account at a different bank. Then I did something that would have seemed impossible to me just weeks earlier. I donated it all. The Sunset Manor Senior Care Facility had been struggling for years. I'd learned about their situation during my secret research. discovering that they provided dignified, compassionate care for elderly residents, but were constantly short of funds. Many of their residents were abandoned by their families, forgotten by the world, surviving on minimal Social Security payments. People just like I had almost become. "Mrs. Richardson, this is an extraordinary gift," said Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the facility's director, when I called her that afternoon. $7 million will allow us to expand our services, hire more staff, and ensure that no resident ever has to worry about losing their home here. "That's exactly what I want," I told her. "Harold and I never had the chance to help people the way we wanted to. This feels like the right way to honor his memory." When I returned home, Lyra was already back from yoga, pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. "Told you she was sleeping when I left. How could she have gone anywhere?" She turned when she heard me come in, her face a mask of forced concern. "Oh, thank God, Thelma. I was so worried. Robert, she's here. I'll call you back." She hung up and rushed over to me, her hands fluttering anxiously. "Where were you? I came home and your bedroom was empty. I thought maybe you'd fallen or—" "I went for a walk," I said simply, settling into my chair. "It's a beautiful day." "A walk? Thelma, you can't just leave the house without telling someone. What if something had happened? What if you'd gotten lost?" I looked at her carefully, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The perfect blonde hair, the designer workout clothes, the manicured nails that had never done an honest day's work. She was beautiful, poised, and absolutely panicked. "I'm fine, dear," I said mildly. "Just felt like getting some fresh air." That evening, Lyra was unusually attentive. She brought me extra blankets, made my favorite tea, and kept asking if I felt all right. I could practically see her mind working, trying to figure out if my unexpected independence meant anything, or if it was just a random fluctuation in my supposed decline. At dinner, she brought up the topic I'd been waiting for. "Thelma, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to discuss some practical matters. You know, planning ahead for when you might need more help." "What kind of help?" I asked, cutting my chicken with hands that didn't shake at all. "Well, financial planning, for instance. Making sure your money is properly managed so you don't have to worry about it. There are legal documents that could make things easier for everyone. Power of attorney documents. Just as I'd expected." "That sounds very thoughtful," I said. "What would these documents do exactly?" Lyra's face lit up with relief. "They would allow Robert and me to handle your banking, pay your bills, make decisions about your care if you're not able to. It's really just a safety net." "I see. And when would we do this?" "Actually, we have an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow afternoon, just to discuss options." Not Tom Brennan, I was certain. Some other lawyer who didn't know me, who would see an elderly woman with a concerned family and rubber stamp whatever they put in front of him. "That sounds fine," I said agreeably. "I trust you to do what's best." The satisfaction that spread across Lyra's face was so obvious that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The next afternoon, we drove to the office of Jonathan Mitchell, attorney at law. I'd looked him up. He was young, inexperienced, and specialized in quick legal services for busy families. Perfect for Lyra's purposes. In his sterile conference room, Lyra sat beside me while Robert held my hand and Mr. Mitchell explained the power of attorney documents in simple terms, as if I were a child. "These papers just ensure that your family can take care of you properly," he said kindly. "Your son and daughter-in-law will be able to manage your finances and make medical decisions if you're unable to do so yourself." "I understand," I said. "And this gives them access to all my accounts?" "Yes, complete access. They'll be able to handle everything so you don't have to worry about complicated financial matters." Lyra squeezed my hand encouragingly. "It's really the best thing for everyone, Mom." I picked up the pen and stared at the signature line for a long moment. In the silence, I could hear Lyra's breathing becoming shallow with anticipation. Then I set the pen down. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I can't sign this." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mom?" Robert's voice was confused. "Why not?" I turned to look at him, my son, who had genuinely believed he was protecting me. "Because yesterday I donated all of my money to charity. There's nothing left for anyone to manage." The silence that followed was deafening. Lyra's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then pure rage. "What did you say?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I gave it all away. $7.2 million to the Sunset Manor Senior Care Facility. Harold and I always wanted to help people who had no one else to care for them." Lyra stood up so fast her chair fell over. "You can't do that. You're not mentally competent. Robert." She obviously doesn't understand what she's done, but Robert was staring at me with dawning comprehension. "Mom, did you know? About the money? About what we were planning?" "I knew everything," I said quietly. I heard Lyra telling her friend Jessica about the inheritance, about how she was earning every penny by living with the difficult old woman. "I know about the medications you've been giving me that no doctor ever prescribed. I know you were planning to put me in a cheap nursing home as soon as you got control of my finances." Lyra's mask finally slipped completely. "You selfish bitch! Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for you? 2 years of my life taking care of your pathetic— Lyra!" Robert's voice cut through her rage, but the damage was done. I stood up slowly, feeling stronger than I had in years. "Mr. Mitchell, I won't be signing any documents today, and I'll be needing a copy of this conversation for my attorney." As we walked to the car, Lyra was silent but vibrating with fury. Robert kept trying to ask questions that I didn't answer. When we got home, the explosion I'd been expecting finally came. The explosion came the moment we walked through the front door. $7 million! Lyra screamed, her face twisted with rage. "You threw away $7 million out of spite!" I sat down in my chair calmly, watching her pace back and forth like a caged animal. Robert stood frozen in the doorway, still processing what had happened. "It wasn't spite," I said quietly. "It was justice." "Justice?" She whirled to face me. "I spent 2 years of my life taking care of you, feeding you, medicating you, making sure you were safe. And this is how you repay me? You spent 2 years drugging me, isolating me, and planning to steal my inheritance," I corrected. "There's a difference. You're insane. Robert, tell her she's insane." But Robert was looking at me with new eyes. "Mom, the medications Lyra gave you, did a doctor really prescribe them?" "No," I said simply. "Dr. Peterson never prescribed anything except my arthritis medication. Everything else came from Lyra." The color drained from Robert's face. "Lyra, what is she talking about?" "She's confused. She doesn't remember her doctor visits." "I remember everything," I said. "I remember you telling Dr. Peterson I was having memory problems when I wasn't. I remember you intercepting my phone calls and telling my friends I was too unwell for visitors. I remember you moving my belongings and then acting like I was losing my mind when I couldn't find them." Lyra's hands were shaking now. "That's not true. Robert, you've seen how she's deteriorated, have I?" Robert's voice was quiet, thoughtful. "Or have I seen what you wanted me to see?" For a moment, Lyra looked genuinely panicked. Then her expression hardened. "Fine. You want to know the truth? The truth is that I've been a saint for putting up with this for 2 years. Do you know what it's like living with someone who can't remember conversations? Who needs constant supervision? Who acts like a victim every time someone tries to help her?" "But I wasn't acting," I said. "I was being victimized. By you." "You're pathetic." The words came out like venom. "A sad, lonely old woman who nobody really wants around. Robert only tolerated you because of the money, and now you've thrown that away too. Congratulations. Now nobody has any reason to care about you at all." The words should have hurt. A year ago, they would have devastated me. But sitting there, looking at this beautiful young woman whose mask had finally slipped completely, I felt nothing but pity. "You're wrong about one thing," I said. "Robert does care about me. Don't you, son?" Robert was staring at Lyra as if seeing her for the first time. "My God, Lyra, what have you done?" "What I had to do. What you were too weak to do. Your mother needed managing, and I managed her. You drugged her. You isolated her. You made her crawl across the floor at her own birthday party. That was an accident." "No," Robert said, his voice growing stronger. "It wasn't. Nothing about this was an accident, was it?" The fight seemed to go out of Lyra all at once. She sank into Harold's old recliner, the one she'd claimed as her own 3 years ago. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now you pack your things and leave," I said. "Both of you." Robert looked stricken. "Mom, I know I made mistakes, but I thought I was helping you. I thought—" "You thought what she told you to think," I said, not unkindly. "But you're my son, Robert. If you really want to rebuild our relationship, we can try. But not while you're married to someone who sees me as nothing but a financial opportunity." "You can't be serious," Lyra said. "Robert, you're not actually going to choose her over me." Robert looked between us for a long moment. Then he walked over to my chair and knelt beside it. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have seen what was happening." "I know," I said, taking his hand. "But you see it now. That's what matters." 3 weeks later, I stood in my kitchen making coffee, real coffee, with caffeine, while watching the sunrise through windows that Lyra had kept covered with heavy curtains. The house felt different now, lighter, like it could breathe again. Robert had filed for divorce and moved into a small apartment across town. He visited every few days, tentatively rebuilding the relationship we'd lost. It would take time, but we had time now. Lyra had threatened to fight the divorce, to claim I'd been mentally incompetent when I donated the money, to have me evaluated for dementia. But Tom Brennan had been thorough in documenting my mental competency, and her own words in Mr. Mitchell's office had been recorded. In the end, she'd settled for what little Robert could offer and disappeared from our lives. The phone rang, interrupting my peaceful morning. I smiled when I saw the caller ID. "Good morning, Dr. Chen." "Good morning, Thelma. I'm calling with wonderful news. The renovations at Sunset Manor are complete, and we're having a dedication ceremony next week. The residents would love to meet the woman who made it all possible. I'd be honored," I said, "but I'm not the one who made it possible. Harold did, by working so hard all those years to save that money. I just made sure it went where it belonged." After I hung up, I walked to the sunroom where Harold's ashes sat in their simple wooden urn on the windowsill. The morning light caught the brass nameplate, making it gleam. "We did good, didn't we?" I said aloud. "Your money is helping people who need it, just like you would have wanted." I could almost hear his voice in the gentle morning breeze. "I'm proud of you, Thelma. You found your strength when you needed it most." That afternoon, I drove myself to Sunset Manor for the first time. My arthritis still bothered me, and I still needed my cane. But I'd stopped taking any medications except what Dr. Peterson actually prescribed. My mind was clear, my hands were steady, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt truly alive. At the facility, I met residents whose stories echoed my own. People who had been forgotten, dismissed, or abandoned by families who should have cherished them. But here, they were treated with dignity and respect. They had activities, friends, purpose. "Mrs. Richardson," said Eleanor, a 92-year-old former teacher, "we can't thank you enough. This place saved my life." "Mine too," I told her, and meant it. As I drove home that evening, I thought about the birthday party 6 months ago, about crawling across my own floor while people watched in silent discomfort. That humiliation had been the catalyst for everything that followed: the awakening, the investigation, the plan, and ultimately, the freedom. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the doorway to the best ones. At 81 years old, I had learned that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity, your autonomy, and your right to be treated with respect. I had learned that family isn't always the people who share your blood, but the people who truly care about your well-being. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't measured by my bank account or my usefulness to others, but by my own choices and my own values. Harold's money was gone, but Harold's love lived on in every person whose life was improved by our gift, and I was still here, still strong, still capable of making my own decisions and living my own life. At 81, I was finally free. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.